When you think of America's Appalachian Trail, a breathtaking 2,160-mile route stretching from Georgia to Maine, you likely envision serene landscapes, invigorating hikes, and cherished moments of family bonding. The trail, synonymous with adventure and the great American outdoors, has long been a haven for nature lovers seeking solace and exhilaration. However, beneath its picturesque facade lies a darker history. Over the years, the Appalachian Trail has been the site of numerous murders and other grim fatalities. While accidents due to treacherous terrain or inclement weather remain the most common dangers, violent crime is not unheard of along the trail. Meanwhile, across the vast expanse of the Missouri River, the first white explorers were awestruck by the grandeur of the Rocky Mountains, their towering peaks soaring over 14,000 feet. Known to Native Americans as the Shining Mountains, these glittering monoliths nearly thwarted the legendary Lewis and Clark expedition, 1804 to 1806. Yet, driven by unyielding determination, the explorers pressed onward, paving the way for the rugged frontiersmen who would later traverse these wild lands. Turning back to the Appalachian region, the late 1760s and early 1770s saw a surge of Euro-American settlers into what is now northeastern Tennessee and southwestern Virginia. Their encroachment provoked significant unrest among the Overhill Cherokees and other indigenous tribes who had long controlled the area. In an attempt to mitigate tensions, the British and the Cherokees signed the Treaty of La Habra in 1770, which pushed the boundary of British-controlled land south to Long Island of the Holston. While this treaty extended British protection to settlements north of the Holston River, it ordered settlers south of the river to vacate. However, rather than comply with the Crown's mandate, the settlers, primarily those in the Watauga settlement at Sycamore Shoals, the Nolichucky settlement, and Carter's Valley, chose an alternative course. They negotiated leases with the Cherokee and in 1772 established the Watauga Association, marking the first independent American constitutional government west of the Appalachians. By 1775, the Watauga and Nolichucky settlers formally purchased their leased lands and established the autonomous Washington District. Eager to secure official recognition, they petitioned Virginia for annexation, but their request was denied. Eventually, North Carolina incorporated the district, designating it as Washington County. The British Crown and colonial authorities, especially Virginia, deemed these land purchases illegal and ordered the settlers to vacate what they considered Cherokee territory. Meanwhile, growing Cherokee resistance emerged as settlements expanded at an alarming rate. Tribal leaders who had previously maintained amicable relations with the settlers found themselves marginalized. Among the Cherokee, a young and defiant war chief named Dragging Canoe staunchly opposed the land sales and called for the forceful expulsion of all European settlers from the Western Territories, leading an estimated 1,000 warriors, who would later be known as the Chickamauga. Dragging Canoe launched a fierce and prolonged resistance against American encroachment, waging an armed struggle that persisted for nearly 2 decades following the failed Cherokee offensives of 1776. At the onset of the American Revolution in 1776, the Over-Mountain settlers, predominantly Whigs opposed to British rule, braced themselves for an inevitable confrontation. The Watauga petition and North Carolina's subsequent annexation of the Washington District only further fueled hostilities as the Cherokee, with British backing, sought to drive out the American frontiersmen. The invasion came in July of that year. Though the Cherokee successfully expelled settlers from Carter's Valley and the Nolichucky settlements, they suffered decisive defeats at Eaton Station on July 20th and at Fort Watauga on July 21st, ultimately forcing their retreat. The settlers' resilience and sacrifices earned them the sympathies of North Carolina's revolutionary leadership. In 1777, the Washington District was officially integrated into North Carolina as Washington County, granting its inhabitants equal status with other North Carolinian citizens. From that moment on, the Over-Mountain men played a pivotal role in frontier warfare, engaging in numerous skirmishes against British loyalists and their Native American allies. In 1778, 20 Watauguans joined the defense of Boonesborough and Harrodsburg against Shawnee attacks. By the summer of 1780, a contingent of Over-Mountain men under Isaac Shelby joined forces with Colonel Charles McDowell to raid Loyalist outposts in the rugged Piedmont region of northwestern South Carolina. They captured Fort Thickety on the Pacolet River and contributed to the Patriot victory at the Battle of Musgrove Mill. However, as the 1780 harvest season approached, many Over-Mountain men returned to their farms, leaving McDowell with a smaller force to continue harassing Loyalists. That same year, after securing a significant triumph at the Battle of Camden in August, British General Charles Cornwallis launched an invasion of North Carolina. To protect the region's Loyalists and eliminate Patriot resistance, he dispatched Major Patrick Ferguson into the mountains. Ferguson swiftly routed McDowell's outnumbered troops, forcing him to retreat westward across the mountains into the Washington district. What followed would alter the course of the Revolution. Facing a dire threat from Ferguson's advancing forces, the Over-Mountain men rallied in a last-ditch effort to defend their homes. Their resolve would lead to the famed Battle of Kings Mountain, an engagement that turned the tide of the war in the Southern theater. Through resilience, determination, and an unyielding will to defy both the British Crown and their adversaries on the frontier, these settlers helped forge the foundations of American independence, leaving behind a legacy of defiance and endurance. Ferguson, seeking to intimidate the frontier rebels, spared a captured frontiersman named Samuel Phillips, cousin to Isaac Shelby, and sent him back with a dire warning. In his message, Ferguson threatened the Over-Mountain men, declaring that if they did not lay down their arms, he would march his army across the mountains, hang their leaders, and lay waste to their settlements with fire and sword. Upon receiving this ominous warning, Shelby rode 40 miles to consult with John Sevier at Watauga. The two leaders swiftly resolved to raise an army and take the fight to Ferguson before he could act. On September 25, 1780, hundreds of determined frontiersmen gathered at Sycamore Shoals, preparing for the arduous campaign ahead. Lead for ammunition had been mined at nearby Bum Pass Cove, while local merchant John Adair generously contributed funds for the expedition. Women of the community worked tirelessly, preparing clothing and provisions for the long march. Black powder essential to the campaign was manufactured by Mary Patton at the Patton Mill along Powder Branch. The assembled force comprised 240 men from Washington County, North Carolina, and the surrounding Washington district under Sevier's command, another 240 men from Sullivan County led by Shelby, and 400 men from southwestern Virginia under Colonel William Campbell. Their strategy was to link up with the remnants of McDowell's force in the mountains, bringing their total number to just over 1,000. To defend their home front, garrisons remained stationed along the Holston and Watauga under the leadership of Anthony Bledsoe and Charles Robertson. Meanwhile, Campbell and his 400 Virginians mustered at Abingdon, on lands belonging to Captain Andrew Colville, now known as the Abingdon Muster Grounds, along the banks of Wolf Creek on September 23, 1780. The next day, they began their march, rendezvousing with a contingent of Tennesseans at Rocky Mount before reaching Sycamore Shoals on September 25th. On September 26th, following an impassioned sermon by Reverend Samuel Doak, the Over-Mountain men embarked on their arduous journey across the Blue Ridge. They marched from Sycamore Shoals to Shelving Rock at the base of Roan Mountain, where they camped for the night. Crossing the mountain via Yellow Mountain Gap, they descended into the North Toe River Valley, following a well-worn trail toward Bright Settlement. By September 29th, the force split at Gillespie Gap. Campbell's men descended toward Wofford's fort in Turkey Cove, while Sevier and Shelby's forces took a route through North Cove to reunite with McDowell's contingent. The full force regrouped the following day at the McDowell family plantation at Quaker Meadows, where they were joined by an additional 300 men under Benjamin Cleveland and Joseph Winston. While encamped at Bedford's Hill on October 1st, tensions flared among the leaders over who should assume overall command. To resolve the dispute, Charles McDowell was dispatched to General Horatio Gates' headquarters to seek an official appointment, leaving his unit under the command of his brother, Joseph McDowell. On October 4th, the Overmountain men reached Ferguson's former base at Gilberttown, only to find that Ferguson had already evacuated, retreating eastward towards Charlotte to link up with the main British army. The following day, while camped at Alexander's Ford along the Green River, a spy informed them that Ferguson was en route to 96, prompting the force to pivot southeastward into South Carolina. By October 6th, the Overmountain men arrived at Cowpens, where they were joined by 400 South Carolinians under Colonel James Williams and a smaller North Carolina militia force under Lieutenant Colonel Frederick Ambright. Among them were Lieutenant Colonel Joseph Hardin and Major John Hardin. That night, another scout reported Ferguson's position. He was encamped just 30 miles to the east. Determined to force a confrontation, the Overmountain men marched through the night. With Patriot forces closing in rapidly, Ferguson decided to make his stand atop Kings Mountain, a 60-foot high flat-topped ridge situated near the North Carolina-South Carolina border, about 50 miles west of Charlotte. His loyalist force of approximately 1,000 entrenched itself on the summit, believing the steep slopes would provide a formidable natural defense. On the afternoon of October 7th, Patriot forces reached Kings Mountain and quickly formed a U-shaped formation, effectively surrounding the Loyalists. At approximately 3 p.m., after a brief exchange of gunfire, William Campbell rallied his men with a defiant cry, "Shout like hell and fight like devils." 2 companies immediately opened fire, initiating a fierce battle. From a northern slope, Shelby, Sevier, Williams, and Cleveland pressed the attack, while Campbell, Winston, and Joseph McDowell assaulted from the south. Though Kings Mountain was difficult to scale, the heavily wooded terrain provided excellent cover for the skilled Patriot riflemen. Both Campbell and Shelby led multiple charges up the slope, only to be repelled each time by withering Loyalist fire. However, after about an hour of relentless fighting, the Patriots' superior marksmanship began to take its toll. The Loyalists, exposed and outgunned, suffered heavy casualties. As the Overmountain men surged up the slopes, Ferguson, recognizing his imminent defeat, attempted to break through the encirclement. He was struck down by a volley of rifle fire, his body riddled with bullets. With their commander dead, the remaining Loyalists quickly surrendered. The battle had lasted little more than an hour, but the results were decisive. Loyalist losses were staggering: 157 killed, 163 so severely wounded that they were left on the battlefield, and 698 taken prisoner. Among the Patriot casualties were 28 killed and 62 wounded, including the South Carolina militia leader James Williams, who perished in battle. John Sevier's brother, Robert, was also mortally wounded. The captured Loyalists were marched toward the mountains, but during a pause in northern Rutherford County, several were put on trial for alleged frontier atrocities. 9 were summarily hanged, including Colonel Ambrose Mills. Ferguson's defeat at Kings Mountain proved a turning point in the Southern campaign of the American Revolution. With his western flank now exposed, General Cornwallis abandoned his invasion of North Carolina and withdrew to Winnsboro, South Carolina. In the aftermath of the battle, Sevier dispatched Joseph Grier on a grueling 600-mile journey to Philadelphia to deliver news of the victory to the Continental Congress. Meanwhile, most of the Overmountain men returned to the Washington District. In the following months, Sevier, Joseph Hardin, and Arthur Campbell, brother of William Campbell, led punitive expeditions against the Cherokee, securing the frontier from further attacks. The Battle of Kings Mountain was more than just a military triumph. It was a defining moment for the Overmountain men. Their unwavering determination and fierce independence not only altered the course of the Revolution, but also cemented their legacy as some of the most formidable warriors of the American frontier. In 1781, William Campbell returned to South Carolina to support Daniel Morgan's Continentals in repelling another British incursion into the region. However, he arrived just a day after Morgan's resounding victory at the Battle of Cowpens. In the years that followed, John Sevier and Isaac Shelby played instrumental roles in shaping the future of Tennessee and Kentucky, respectively. Other prominent over-mountain men who left a lasting legacy included John Crockett, father of the legendary Davy Crockett, William Lenore, Joseph Dixon, Daniel Smith, William Russell, and John Rhea, all of whom fought at Kings Mountain. Meanwhile, Anthony Bledsoe commanded the home guard, ensuring the security of the Holston settlements while the main force was away in battle. In 1980, Congress officially designated the Over-Mountain Victory National Historic Trail, preserving the historic route taken by the Over-Mountain men from their mustering grounds at Sycamore Shoals State Historic Park to the battle site at Kings Mountain National Military Park. The trail also includes several branch routes through Virginia and North Carolina, commemorating the arduous journey that helped turn the tide of the American Revolution. To Eastern readers of the time, the lives of the mountain men seemed like a romanticized tale of adventure and untamed freedom. Their stories were often sanitized for popular consumption, exaggerated exploits, softened depictions of their relationships with Native Americans, and mythologized encounters with grizzly bears. However, the reality was far harsher. Life on the frontier was perilous, with death a constant companion. During the 1820s in Arizona, famed trapper James Ohio Patty recalled a brutal statistic. Out of 160 men who set out along the Gila River, only 16 survived a single year. Fatal disputes between friends, relentless thirst, starvation, violent storms, accidents, and disease all took their toll. Yet, the greatest dangers often came from encounters with Native American tribes and the region's formidable grizzly bears. These bears, which had little fear of humans, reportedly roamed in groups of 50 to 60. Trappers described seeing as many as 220 in a single day, some weighing over 1,000 pounds and capable of running at speeds up to 35 miles per hour. Even accounting for the trappers' tendency to embellish, the numbers suggest a daunting and perilous frontier. Some mountain men, however, went beyond the line separating civilization from savagery. One such figure was Charlie Gardner, nicknamed Phil due to his origins in Philadelphia, the so-called City of Brotherly Love. On one fateful trapping expedition, Gardner and his Native American companion were caught in a violent storm, and both were presumed dead. Days later, Gardner rode into camp alone. Dismounting, he pulled a piece of a human leg from his pack and tossed it to the camp dog, exclaiming, "There, damn you, now I won't have to gnaw on you anymore." The story of his grim survival earned him the moniker Cannibal Phil. His legend only grew darker. One winter, as food supplies dwindled, it was said that Gardner's culinary work extended to his Native American wife. On the frontier, food was a constant obsession. A starving trapper, unsure of when he would next eat, might gorge himself on 4 or 5 pounds of meat in a single sitting. Crossing the unforgiving desert could force men to eat ants or crickets. Some were known to stew their mules' ears or soak, and chew their leather moccasins for sustenance. When game was plentiful, feasts were held, and men ate until their bellies, or their bags of dried meat, were full. Even in modern times, America's wilderness has remained deadly. The idyllic Appalachian Trail, traversed by thousands of hikers each year, has witnessed its share of tragedy. Since 1974, at least 11 hikers have been murdered along the trail. The most recent known case occurred in 2011 when Scott Lilly, a hiker from Indiana, was found dead from asphyxia by suffocation in what authorities ruled as a homicide. To this day, the case remains unsolved. One of the most chilling incidents involved Randall Lee Smith, a convicted murderer with a history of violence against hikers. In 1981, Smith attacked 2 social workers, Robert Mountford Jr. and Laura Susan Ramsey, both 27 years old and from Maine. Mountford was shot, while Ramsey was beaten and stabbed. Due to insufficient evidence, Smith served only 15 years of his 30-year sentence before being released, only to strike again. In 2008, he attempted to murder 2 fishermen on the trail, shooting them in cold blood. Fortunately, they survived. Even experienced hikers have fallen victim to the dangers of the Appalachian wilderness. In 2001, seasoned hiker Louise Chaput was found stabbed to death along the White Mountains section of the trail in New Hampshire. Similarly, in 1996, hikers Julie Williams and Lolly Winans were brutally murdered in Virginia's Shenandoah National Park, their throats slashed in a crime that remains unsolved. Perhaps one of the most tragic cases was the 1988 murder of Rebecca White and Claudia Brenner. While hiking together, the couple was ambushed by a man named Stephen Roykar, who later admitted in court that he had been enraged at the sight of two women together. He opened fire, fatally wounding White, while Brenner managed to escape. Carr was later convicted and sentenced to life without parole. Despite these grim episodes, the legacy of the mountain men endures. Whether alone or in small groups, they were the first to chart paths across the vast Missouri and into the uncharted Rocky Mountains, laying the groundwork for the settlers and pioneers who followed. What were once lonely trails through rugged terrain eventually became the routes of transcontinental railroads and highways, connecting the coasts of a growing nation. These men embodied the raw, untamed spirit of America, rebels against the constraints of society, choosing instead to carve out a life in the vast unknown, where death could come in countless forms. Many, though forever changed by their experiences, eventually returned to civilization, serving as guides for the wagon trains that carried settlers westward in the 1840s and 1850s. Ironically, the very men who sought refuge in the unexplored wilderness were the ones who ultimately led the society they had abandoned into their final frontier.